Your body, and in fact the bodies of all living things on the planet, is an energy transforming machine. You are a beautiful system that takes energy from one form and uses it to create all sorts of reactions inside your body. This happens at every minute of every day, inside every single cell in your body. And as you know, the energy that we use is stored in a form called ATP, a tiny molecular battery that powers all of the chemical reactions in your body. ATP is a very short-lived molecule. You make and use ATP on a regular, consistent basis. If you are deprived of ATP for even a few minutes, the cellular machines in your body start to die. You cannot be deprived of ATP for even a single second. Everything that you do requires energy. Life, in a way, is a system of moving energy around. And how do we do that? Where do we get our energy from? Well, there is life that is wholly independent of any other planetary body in the universe. Life that gets its energy directly from the Earth itself, but we don't. We get our energy from the sun. The sun is the ultimate source of all of our energy. Life is a way of taking sunlight and using that sunlight to power chemical reactions. Complex, beautiful chemical reactions. All of the chemical reactions of your body. Sunlight comes to the Earth and it is stored in a form called glucose. Glucose is a way of capturing the energy of sunlight and keeping it in your body until you're ready to use it. We have other means of storing energy, of course. We've discussed lipids, and lipids are a way of storing energy long term, but really glucose is the key molecule of life, one of the most important molecules that there is. Glucose is then used to re-extract that energy and liberate it into the form of ATP, a form that we can use to power any energy or any reaction that we choose. Now, these two processes, this process of taking sunlight and turning it into glucose, and the second process of turning glucose and creating ATP, these are the processes that we're going to study in this unit. The first process is, of course, photosynthesis. And photosynthesis takes place in plants in an organelle called the chloroplast. The other reaction, taking glucose, extracting its energy, and charging up those chemical batteries, those ATP molecules that are so critical for life, that is called cellular respiration. These two processes are in some ways the inverse of one another, and the overall chemical reaction for photosynthesis is exactly the reverse of the overall chemical reaction for cellular respiration. But the entire process, the whole thing, taking energy from the sun and turning it into ATP, both of these organelles and both of these processes involve a lot of similar steps, because both processes are processes of energy transformation, and the cell tends to recycle good ideas. If it has a good idea for turning sunlight energy and capturing it into glucose, it might reuse a similar idea for taking glucose energy and changing it into ATP. So you'll notice some similarities between the way that the chloroplast works and the way that the mitochondria works. We're going to start by discussing photosynthesis. Photosynthesis is the single most important chemical reaction for life on this planet. Before photosynthesis, life still existed and it was able to extract energy from small molecules that were in the environment. But it could not be very large, it could not be very fast, and it could not be very complex until some organism learned to capture energy from the sun and use that energy from the sun to build the cells of its body. Photosynthesis takes the abundant energy that is available, that streams onto the surface of our planet every day from the sun, and it turns that into chemical energy, captured in the form of glucose. It also has another function. Photosynthesis is the way that carbon atoms get from the environment to life. It is called carbon capture. Photosynthesis has two purposes: energy capture from the sun and carbon capture. And what is that carbon good for? Well, that carbon is the carbon that's used to build every single molecule in your body. You get all of your energy from the sun via photosynthesis, and also all of the carbon in all of your molecules from photosynthesis. It's hard to overstate the importance of this chemical reaction. This is the general idea of photosynthesis. Photosynthesis takes carbon dioxide, which is available in the atmosphere. It is not a particularly abundant molecule in the atmosphere, but there's more than enough of it to power life on Earth. It also takes water, which is surprisingly abundant on both the surface of the Earth and on the surfaces of many other planets, in case you're interested. It takes these and transforms them into glucose. It does this by capturing the energy of sunlight. This is an endergonic reaction. Sunlight provides the energy that's necessary. Now glucose is an important molecule for energy, as we already know. We know that if we have glucose, we can use that glucose to charge up ATP. However, glucose is also a critical molecule because, as I said, this is the carbon capturing molecule. This means that in the bodies of living things, such as plants and animals, glucose can be transformed into all of the other organic macromolecules. We can take glucose and we could make polysaccharides, of course. Such as cellulose, the most abundant molecule that exists in living things. We could also take this glucose and we could transform it into an amino acid, which we could use to build a protein. We could transform it into a nucleic acid, which we could use to pass on our hereditary information, or we could take this glucose and we could transform it into a lipid, which we could use to store energy long term, or to build all of the cell membranes of all of the cells of our body. This is a tremendously important thing. Glucose is a critical step in the formation of complex, fast-moving, high-energy life forms. Photosynthesis has two functions. It has the function of capturing energy from sunlight, and it also has the function of capturing carbon dioxide from the atmosphere. These two functions actually take place in two different stages. We can think of them as one thing happening first and the second thing happening second, although really this is all happening simultaneously in most plants. The energy capture stage is called the light reactions. Energy is captured from the sun and fixed into a chemical form. The chemical form that this energy takes is our good old familiar ATP, and also a different chemical battery called NADPH. So ATP and NADPH, two chemical batteries, you could think of them as AA and D cell batteries if you like, are charged up using sunlight during the light reactions. Then these charged up batteries are used in the second part of photosynthesis, which is the carbon fixation stage, taking atmospheric carbon dioxide and fixing it, or sticking it into an organic molecule. This part of photosynthesis is called the Calvin cycle. Calvin cycle. So these charged up batteries are then used to fix carbon dioxide and turn it into glucose.
This is a diagram of a chloroplast of a cell. The chloroplast is an interesting organelle because it has a double membrane. It also has an internal structure that I'd like you to be aware of. These membrane-bound sacs inside the chloroplast are called thylakoids. Inside the thylakoid is called the thylakoid space. And outside of the thylakoids is called the stroma. The stroma is the place that is inside the chloroplast but not inside a thylakoid. The reason I'm showing you this is because the light reactions take place in one part of the chloroplast, namely on the surface of the thylakoid membrane, and the Calvin cycle takes place in a different part of the chloroplast. The Calvin cycle takes place inside the stroma.
What I've drawn here is an overview of the process of photosynthesis. This shows the general flow of energy through the system and the role of the light reactions and how those play into the Calvin cycle. We're going to go into the gory molecular details about what is actually happening in the light reactions and what is actually happening in the Calvin cycle in future videos. But for this one, we're just going to consider the overall picture. So the overall picture is that sunlight comes in the light reactions, is captured, and is used to split apart water. That is one of the great inventions of the chloroplast, that sunlight is used to split water into its elements. The oxygen is released as a byproduct, as O2, oxygen gas, and the hydrogens are actually captured by this molecule right here. NADP+ is the uncharged version of this particular type of molecular battery. NADPH is the charged up version. So the hydrogens from the water wind up in the NADPHs. Now, light reactions generate NADPHs. They also generate ATP. These are highly energy intensive reactions. They're capturing energy from the sunlight, and we're using it to charge up ATP and also to charge up NADPH. These charged up ATPs and NADPHs, these get moved to a different part of the chloroplast. This stuff all happens in the thylakoid. In fact, on the surface of the thylakoid membrane is where all the light reactions occur. The ATP and NADPH move to the stroma of the chloroplast. Remember that space that's not the thylakoid. And they power this Calvin cycle. I've drawn it as a little loop here because it really is a cycle of things kind of flowing in a circle, and we will talk about that later. Carbon dioxide is brought in from outside the plant and is captured and fixed into glucose. It's transformed into this stable molecule that we can use to store energy long term or transform into any of the other types of molecules in the cell. During this process, the energy from the ATP and the energy from the NADPH is used up. These H's from the NADPH, they actually wind up in this glucose. So the hydrogen was transferred from the water to the NADPH and then to the glucose. then we're left with all of these uncharged molecular batteries, the ADPs and the NADP pluses, uncharged batteries. These go back to the thylakoid and get recharged in the light reactions. So we're continually reusing these batteries, and that powers the capture of carbon from the atmosphere to create glucose.